Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl. And yes, we finally got there. We managed to get to our next series for Warhammer The Old World Faction Focus, where we've been looking at the last edition of the rulebook for a faction, seeing what the units were, what the army lists were, how they played, to give us an idea of what units we might see in Warhammer The Old World, and to see how those units might play. Now, we've done a few so far. We've covered Tomb Kings, we've covered High Elves and Dark Elves, but we're now on to Bretonnia. It's taken some time. I've been incredibly busy with real life. Plus, I kind of made this videos, and then they then did the big reveal on the Bretonnian faction. So I kind of wanted to remake it with the new information that we had on the Bretonnian faction, and the fact that Warhammer The Old World is due for release now in early 2024. That is absolutely fantastic. The other thing you'll notice is there's no camera this time. So we've had some feedback that the camera being on can be distracting when making specific YouTube content as opposed to a live streaming content. So please give me a feedback on whether you prefer to see the camera on or off. And the other reason we've turned the camera off is so that we can make the pictures of the miniatures bigger as we go through it. So yes, today we're doing the Bretonnians, one of my favourite factions in Warhammer Fantasy Battle. So just a couple of things to talk about the army as first is they never got a 7th edition or even 8th edition army book. So the last army book that came out was in the 6th edition, and it is paperback as opposed to hardback like you see in the 8th edition ones. And a lot of things had been stripped out of the book from previously, particularly in regards to the special characters. The roster itself is quite small. But we're still going to go through each of the different areas as in the previous series of videos. In terms of army rules, there is a special rule that allows their knights to have a special formation known as lance formation, which does give them some advantages in terms of the number of models that can attack and so on. And they also get the opportunity to pray before the battle. This is known as Blessing of the Lady. If they do decide to pray, then the opponent gets to decide if they want to go first or second. However, the Bretonnian army then gets a 6+ ward save to every model and unit that has the Knight's Vow, the Questing Vow, the Grail Vow, as well as the Prophetesses and the Damsels of the Lady. And if that attack is with strength 5 or higher, they get a 5+ ward save. So quite an interesting choice for the Bretonnian player there. 5+ ward save against strength 5 attacks and higher on those knight models can be pretty powerful. So something to keep in mind there. Okay, so without further ado then, let's have a look at the Bretonnian lords that were in this army book. So here you go, you've got the Bretonnian lords here. In terms of stats, they've got pretty good weapon skill, initiative and leadership, but low ballistic skill as you can imagine, but also quite low wounds for the lord model. Equipment wise, they come with a hand weapon and heavy armor, and then if they take the Questing Vow, they can have a great weapon. They can take a lance. If they have the Grail Vow, they can take a Morning Star, which is essentially a flail, and a shield as well for extra points. So lots of different options there, but those weapon options can be tailored into the vow, and we can see down below what the impact of those different vows are. Mount options including Warhorse, Pegasus and Hippogriff, so quite a lot of options there, and they can take 100 points of magic items, and also a special category specifically for Bretonnians are chivalric virtues. But that does feed into that 100 points of items. And then special rules, the Bretonnian army book is quite lacking in special rules compared to the 8th edition army books. I don't dislike that from a flavour, not having hundreds of special rules for each unit. I actually quite like that, but it does give them a problem in terms of competitiveness in 8th edition, and certainly Bretonnia was outdated, outclassed, and at the bottom of the pack, probably along with Tomb Kings in terms of competitiveness during that period. But in terms of special rules, they have pure breed Warhorse, which means that the Bretonnians can take barding with no movement penalties, which is pretty good and very fluffy as well. That keeps with the theming of Bretonnians. They're heavily armored knights and knightly horses. And then he comes with the Knight's Vow. That's ignore panic caused by peasants. But if you take the Questing Vow for the Great Weapon, you can ignore panic caused by peasants. You can re-roll psychology tests, but you can't use lances. Or you take the Grail Vow, which is immune to psychology, always starts with Blessing of the Lady, and all attacks are magical. Of those, to be honest, I nearly always took the Grail Vow, and I always wanted a lance on my lord. So, in my local meta, I always had at least one lord, but mainly on a horse or a Royal Pegasus, not using the Hippogriff because I wanted my lord in a unit, especially during the 8th edition. And due to a limited roster with no monsters, the lord is the single most powerful model pretty much in terms of his actual damage output. So you're always going to equip him with his virtues, magic items to boost what is reality. He doesn't have the best damage, doesn't have the best survivability. So, he really does need those buffs. So in terms of what we've got here, so if you look to the right-hand side of the screen, just underneath the Ghost Owl image, you can see those were the classic miniatures. The yellow one on the left was typically the lord I would use. I do like helmeted heads in particular. He has a lance, and that was typically the lord. That I would use. But you also had the option of the one there with kind of a great weapon as well. But if we look below, this is the brand new plastic lord that was revealed by Games Workshop. On the Pegasus there, looks fantastic. It is plastic, and coming with a lance there as well. We obviously don't know what the rules are going to be, but nice to see a plastic character, and I think that's a pretty nice looking miniature to boot. And then if you look at the top, we can see what these are both resin models, battle standard bearers, but also in the writing that Games Workshop on the reveal that these were also lords. So there is an option for a lord on foot. There was no option for that in the last army book, so we now have the option for a lord on foot, a lord on a horse, and a lord on a Pegasus at least. No sign of a hippogriff as yet. Maybe that's still to come. But you can see them there with the battle standard, but they double up as lords. I suspect they may well double up as paladins as well, but we've yet to see that. But both of those are resin, but we do have a plastic lord on Pegasus, which is very nice. And often I would be putting my lord in a unit of Pegasus, that extra mobility from a hard-hitting unit being quite nice. So great to see that option coming in the future. So as we move to look at our second Bretonnian lord, that is the Prophetess of the Lady. As you'd expect for a caster, all the stats are pretty low as opposed to the leadership. Equipment is hand weapon only, level 3 or 4, and that is Law of Beasts or Life. Can be mounted on a Pegasus or a Warhorse. And then you've got special rules of Aura of the Lady. They get magic resistance of 2, and then they also get the pure breed Warhorse. To be honest, you'd always take a Prophetess of the Lady, particularly again in 8th edition. The units, they're not the strongest. They need all the buffs they can get. So taking something like Law of Life, getting access to the buffs, but then also to that all-important Dwellers Below was critical. So, and always a level 4 caster as well. You just need that. And, often you try and get her on a warhorse in a unit, such as Knights Errant. They are the cheapest of the knights. So, and you kind of put them, behind the line. It keeps them from automatically charging with their impetuous rule and protects your prophetess, but is mobile enough on the horse. So, yeah, as it says there, magic items to focus on enhancing her survivability or casting. She's not heavily armored, but you want to get that casting out there as well. And if you look at the pictures we have here, clearly the one top middle, that is the original one, but that's actually on a unicorn there, but that is the original one in terms of a prophetess of the lady. And we can see here the one on the right there. Now that it's a named character, Lady Elise Ducard. We don't know if she is essentially the new Fey Enchantress, of which there should be a Fey Enchantress, but their names do change over the years. The current one in the Bretonnian book in the last edition was Morgiana, but so we don't know if that's going to be Lady Elise is going to be the Fey Enchantress, or she is just going to be a named prophetess of the lady. But it's a lovely model there on the unicorn. Looks fantastic. And again, I think it is in resin, but we can at least see the quality of some of the miniatures that are coming out, and I think that'll be fantastic. And even if you don't want to use her as Lady Elise, she would definitely work very well as a prophetess. We've yet to see if there will be a specific unicorn mount or not. There was not for the prophetess. She only had a Pegasus or a Warhorse option. The only person that actually rode a unicorn was the Fey Enchantress. And that's it. There are only 2 Lord choices for the Bretonnian army. As I said, it is quite a limited roster. And for me, certainly you would be taking at least one of each of those in most cases. So we will see how the rest of the roster looks like, but it is limited overall. I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did enjoy the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. And as always, if you want to see more content, please hit that subscribe button. It's totally free for you to do, and it means a lot for me. And also, please give me the feedback. Do you want the camera on for dedicated YouTube content or not? The camera will be on, obviously, for live streaming. But if you prefer the camera off because it's distracting or takes up portions of the screen, then please let me know, because I do want to improve the quality of the content, and it's you guys that watch it, so I need to get your feedback on what you prefer. You've been watching The Ghost Owl. Tune back in as we take a look at the Bretonnian heroes.